one key aspect of Steven Berkoff was his use of makeup. As we already know, often his characters were over-exaggerated, certain characteristics showed off a character more and were more prominent in that character, linking to what a lot of other practitioners in theatre did too. His use of makeup was one major way that he could project to an audience a certain characteristic of a character, and would also help overemphasize certain features. Obviously he used facial masks, he used physical masks as well, but by using makeup and paint he could also project the idea of facial masks onto an audience, and because it would highlight certain features, so it would make it more easy to observe for an audience if the eyes were outlined and the natural lines of the face were made more obvious, so that the audience could see the emotions clearer and therefore understand the characters more. His use of makeup also helped in the mime sort of effect that he gave. Obviously he used language as well, but when using this mime sort of over exaggeration, big movements of mime, this obviously linked to makeup quite a lot, because a lot of his makeup had a white face. A lot of it was sort of like a traditional mime would be, and I think this worked well in showing to an audience the separation from the emotional side and to the physical characteristics of each character. He used minimal sets and made sure that all his props had a use, so I think that's another reason why he chose things like costumes and lighting and makeup over the sets, because I think he found that it would help create this abstract feel to the characters and show to the audience different characteristics he was trying to get across, rather than having a naturalistic environment. So that's obviously in comparison to what we did with Anatomy of a Suicide, which is Stanislavski, the makeup would be more natural or minimalistic, whereas with Berkoff using massive white faces and eyeliner to outline the eyes and eyebrows, often it was all gestural. When looking at his makeup previously done, not only just in history but also in our school, something we can relate to, and I know that last year's did a play called Woman Alone by Berkoff, and all their characters, they drew certain features onto their characters to distinguish their characteristics. So on a more worried character they might draw worry lines, or older they might draw wrinkles, they might show do bright pink lips to show youth. And so it was all about how you could physically show something to an audience, physically embody something to an audience that the script is has connotations towards, sorry. Often as well, because Berkoff is so extreme in his methods and his physicalization is so extreme, the makeup had to be bold and stand out to an audience. And I think because there is so much movement going on as well, that to try and draw attention back to the facial mask, because gestures are so big as well, you want to draw the attention to the face and you don't want to detract that as well. So moving on to our piece and how we use makeup to show our characters. We initially looked at some of the other plays, some of the other pieces, and a couple of years ago how they use makeup and different ideas behind it. Obviously there was a group that did Lunch a couple of years ago, and they did contrast in makeup, so some wore white faces, some just outlined features, and I think it very much depends on your play and what you're trying to show about the character. For our play, we had to look at what we thought would create a good contrast for the characters, but also have the waitresses all similar because they represent the idea of the cafe and working together as one unit, and Eddie had to be different. I think the main thing for us when using makeup was to show Eddie as a contrast to all the waitresses, and was also the difficulty of multi-role, because Leah has to change from the waitress to the manager. So we agreed on the fact that we wanted a white face. I think because our costume was going to be fairly simplistic of waitresses and a suit, I think white face would, again, attract attention towards our faces and facial expressions. I think we had some good facial expressions in our piece, so I didn't want us to lose that, and I think it would be good to have the white faces because it would draw attention of the audience. We decided that all the waitresses would have red lips, eyeliner, red eyeshadow and eyebrows done. We decided on this because this outlines the features. I think most groups decided on having the features outlined because obviously it draws more attention, it makes your features clearer, and then when you're gesturing things and using facial expressions, it's easier to read and it shows off your character easier, so which is what Bake Off intended. So with all that, and added on top, we decided that the waitresses, we would have little red circles on our cheeks. I think there was a lot of discussion about why we did this, but I think we came to the conclusion that it was to show the sort of one entity of the cafe, and how that we sort of felt like these little circles gave like a doll-like appearance almost, and so use that doll-like appearance as a sort of metaphor for all the waitresses when they stand like this, or when they snap back into their original positions. Also deceiving appearances, so in the exterior the waitresses might seem clean cut and pretty and perfect, you know, obviously they want to entice customers to come into the cafe, but when you realise throughout the piece that they're actually quite grotesque, then there's more of an understanding behind that. We could have explored that more with makeup, maybe smudge it a little bit as we moved along the play if we really wanted to show that metaphor, but I think that this doll-like exterior sort of showed that nicely. In contrast to Peter as Eddie had the similar sort of thing. He had bigger eyebrows, and that was just to overshow his masculinity as Eddie. Obviously Eddie is egotistical. We could have looked more into how certain features, if they're bigger or bolder, they could show off a certain emotion, but I think we wanted to show how our own facial expressions could be exaggerated by makeup, not that we were physically wearing makeup as a mask, because I think that's more what Bake Off intended. With Peter, he also had black lips instead of red lips. I think that was like a subtle change as well, which showed contrast to all of us as the waitresses, and didn't really have any deep meaning behind the colour itself, but was mainly to show contrast, and I think that worked effectively.